Hello, nonprofit leaders. I'm Sarah Olivieri, your host, and this podcast is here to assist people like you, executive directors, board members, and other nonprofit leaders make a bigger impact with insights, tips, and lessons learned from nonprofit leaders and experts. Having been an executive director, a board member, and now a consultant and coach, I truly understand the challenges you face. And that's why I'm here. I'm all about working smarter, not harder, so you can make a bigger impact without the burnout. And so is our sponsor, DonorBox. DonorBox isn't just a suite of helpful fundraising tools, it's a partner that helps you raise more money and supports you in retaining your donors. I love their forward-thinking approach. Visit donorbox.org to learn more. And don't forget to sign up for the Inspired Nonprofit Leadership newsletter, where you'll get bite-sized, actionable tips just for nonprofit leaders like you, delivered weekly to your inbox. Sign up at inspirednonprofitleadership.com/sign up. Okay, let's dive into today's episode. My guest for this episode is Leroy Roberts, a dynamic speaker, personal development, and coaching strategist specializing in leadership, communication, and connection. He has a proven track record addressing military personnel, law enforcement, educators, and corporate professionals. He inspires C-suite executives to achieve peak performance and build meaningful relationships. Welcome, Leroy. Before we dive into things leadership, would you share a little bit about yourself personally?
Thank you so much for having me on your show, and also for the opportunity to share with your amazing audience. Now, before we begin, because you have shared a lot there, and I don't want people to get it wrong that I didn't start out this way. In fact, and your audience can probably tell by my accent that I have a Caribbean flavor to it, and exactly that. So life for me started out in the Caribbean, Jamaica to be exact. And when I started out many, many decades ago, all I had was a dream. And my only dream was to make it to high school. That was it. Because surprisingly, for most people, that's automatic. But for me, that was the very first time that was being done in my entire family. And that dream, it blossomed, it grew arms and legs, and eventually, ta-da, I'm here today. But there's a lot that happened in the between time, which I know we'll get in some of that as well as we discuss and share.
Yeah, well, let's go there a little bit now. What are kind of the big bullet points in your journey to becoming a leadership expert?
That was not my intention in the beginning, and that ties back to what I shared just now. All I had was a dream to do something different, a dream not to accept the life that was being offered to me and the options which were rather limiting. And over time, as I went towards my goal, towards my vision, and I achieved each one, it opened up a lot more opportunities. And of course, along the way, I am grateful to have met a lot of great people who have poured so much into me and have inspired me to do more. And during that time, I would, of course, created a larger vision for myself, because that led to, of course, me going into public service, because in the Caribbean, I did serve in law enforcement and I was active in my community. And from a very, very early stage, I recognized that as a citizen of a country, life is not just about you and your personal goals and dreams, but apart from achieving success on a personal level and professionally, you should also have some social contribution. And I developed very, very early on, and thankfully, because of the influence I had around me, the importance of having community interest. And it was those goals and dreams that really led me to pursue goals to be able to give back to my country, that was struggling at the time with crime and violence. And sadly, that is still a challenge there, but we have come a long way. And that eventually led to me moving to Europe, to the UK, where I now live with my family here. And that led to a life military service and having worked in multiple sectors. And of course, most relevant to the topic now, I've also worked in the nonprofit sector, particularly within the credit union space, where I have a strong desire to give back and to serve those communities who are unserved and underrepresented. It is sadly it's sad that even in a nation that I'm talking to you from, we're talking about the sixth largest economy in the world, but yet still you'd be surprised to know that there is a good percentage of people here that are still unbanked, that are shut out of the financial system. And in this 21st century, it is impossible for you to survive if you are shut out of that financial system. And my passion is around that and other things as well.
Yeah. I think, one thing that strikes me in your story is that perseverance. I think, when I was a young nonprofit leader, because I found myself running a nonprofit founding a nonprofit at age 25. And, people would ask me, oh, well, how'd you make that happen? How'd you get there? And I was like, honestly, I'm just the only one who didn't quit.
Mm.
And certainly, my understanding of leadership and what goes into it has evolved quite a bit. But recently I've been reflecting on that. I think with so much upheaval and turmoil and friction coming to the nonprofit space and to many other spaces, I have been frustrated in some ways with the number of leaders who just kind of like roll over and quit. They're like, this is terrible. We're going to tighten our budgets. And maybe they don't quit completely. But I'm guessing, like you, I am always driven to find a solution. I am always like, there is a way. We will figure it out. We will solve this. We will find the money. We will not just roll over and accept that it's gone. We will replace it. We will persevere no matter what. We'll just keep going and picking at the problem and figuring out what we can do until we get it. And so I'm wondering if you can reflect on that a little and share with us a bit, what are some of those kind of tried and true cornerstones of leadership that we maybe even need more than ever in this digital age?
No, thank you so much for that. And I'm happy that you shared that. It's so inspiring to hear. And you're perfectly right. And I think more than anything else, the one key quality that I think that has stood out for me in my entire experience so far is courage. In order for you to survive and to really step into your leadership potential and to make that contribution that deliver outcomes for the betterment of all, you must be courageous. You must be willing to do the unpopular things. You must be able to make those hard decisions. You must be able to stick with your passion. And I didn't know it at the time, but it is courage that moved me from being barefooted in a dusty yard in the countryside of a small island, because I was willing to do something that has never been done. And as I shared with you before, for most people, they would think, what do you mean? You were, yes, I was the very first one to make a number of decisions. And I think that's what it means to be a leader, to
Yeah.
find that courage to go first, to do that thing that nobody wants to do. But quietly, when you do it, people are going to, not all, but some will recognize you and, congratulate you for having taken that first step. Because what other thing I have come to recognize as well in my own experience is that a lot of people are afraid. They're just scared. And they're, of course, one of those fears is fear of failure. They don't want to fail. And I think that's another challenge as well. We don't speak that much about failure because we think, you know, we should not fail. We should always be perfect. And the shame that comes with that. But the truth of the matter is, How will you learn? How will you grow? And most of the wonderful inventions, most of the wonderful solutions, even that we have now, they came about as a result of intense failure. And you're so right. And I think that's needed in this space now so that we don't quit when it's at the most crucial point. We need people who are resilient. But where's that going to come from? That's going to come from courage. Courage to pursue your passion. Courage to remember why did you go into this in the first place? Or as I would put it, why did you accept your calling? Because I personally believe that there is a problem out there that has our name written on it. And if you get to that place where you can be quiet for a while, you will figure out what that is and pursue that. For me, this is leadership. And I didn't know that this is what it was. It took me a very, very long time. And when I see the incredible work that many other people, trailblazers, was doing ahead of me, I am blown away by how they got started and how they didn't quit. And I think those people were a big inspiration for me, and they're some of the reasons why I'm still keeping on, just like you and the incredible story you just shared just now.
Yeah. I've heard you say the word quiet a couple times, and that really resonates with me when I think about having courage, being courageous. It is a very internal kind of quiet experience. At least I have experienced it. And it is very much one to me of um, being able to hold your fear without letting it take over and cause you to freeze. Right? If you're afraid of your fear, then you're likely to freeze or avoid taking action. And being courageous to me is, I've heard some people say it's like being afraid and doing it anyway.
Yes.
But I think there's a little more nuance to that. It's being able to embrace the fear. And in some cases, even use it as a tool, right? When we're afraid, we can sometimes get adrenaline, or we can get angry, or we turn that anger into passion to fuel us, or we could turn it into something else, but we don't want to avoid that. But I think you're so right in, that quietness of observing where you are and observing your own emotional state and being able to carry that with you rather than have it kind of take over and drive.
No,
Um,
that's beautiful.
yeah.
I like the way you're building on that. And if I may just add to that, um, and I will go a bit further by saying quiet, quiet confidence leads to expressed courage. And that confidence comes from knowledge. The knowledge knowing, the knowledge that there are challenges that we were made to solve. And these challenges are not bigger than us, they're all figure outable. It will take some time, it will take some failure, but we can fail forward, to borrow a phrase, on these and just keep on going. And I think the human spirit is incredible. When you look at what we've achieved, just look back 100 years ago, what life was like then compared to now. And we just need to remember that. Quiet confidence leads to express courage. And that requires that we need to connect back to, you know, our source and recognize that, guess what? We're not just here to point problems out and complain about them, but rather some of the reason why we are seeing these problems is because we're supposed to do something about it. And I think if a lot more of that attitude and approach would be present, then most of our ills and woes would have been overcome a long time ago.
Yeah. And I hear you talking about that in that um, a theme of kind of navigating or pioneering, going where like you had to do at a young age, or well, you chose to go somewhere no one in your world had been before. And I'd love to dig into that because I think that this the leadership skills of pioneering are kind of they certainly have a lot of crossover with all of their leadership skills, but I think they're very much needed today. And you, I think, have some experience in, high stakes backgrounds. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what are the things that leaders need to do or embrace or be aware of, specifically when they're kind of pioneering, making those hard decisions out on a limb, maybe, and in a high stakes environment.
And again, that's a beautiful question, and I'm happy to take a crack at it. Now, I have come to discover this. You don't really get exposed to your true potential as a leader until when you find yourself in certain environments which requires you to reach into that higher side of yourself and to use untapped potential that you never know that you really had. And sometimes it's a product of crisis. And it happened, if I may say the word, accidentally sometime, even though I don't think anything as an accident, but I'm just use that so that people can understand. And most of what I'm doing now, I didn't set out to do it early on. But as I was exposed to certain different environments, and because I would have had a history from back in the Caribbean of having taken that first step and recognize how wonderful my life has turned out as a result of taking that first step. Every other subsequent step thereafter, I was able to take that step with that quiet confidence yet again, and that courage, knowing that, guess what? Even if I don't have all the information to hand, I know that this is figure outable and I can solve it. And that's what I want, your audience to take away from this, is that you will not always have all the pieces. And sometimes you'll find the pieces in the pieces of fragmented challenges that you will often, find yourself having from time to time. But that's,
And can I just jump in and
please
say,
do.
you'll probably never have all the pieces.
No, that's so
Like,
true.
please don't wait. I've never been in that scenario where you had all the pieces, right?
No, and I'm happy that you jumped in at that time, because I think that's one of the things that keeps us back so often and so many times, is because we fear to attempt, because we doubt our ability to do well. But the truth of the matter is, what some people look on as failure, if you really interpret that with fresh eyes, you recognize that those were opportunities really for you to expose yourself and for you to grow into that type of leader and individual you need to be to get to the next level, so that you can best serve yourself, your family, and your community.
Yeah, so true. So tell me, I'd love to hear a little more about, who do you work with these days? And, what are you typically hired to do? And when you get into that role, what are your kind of first steps working with a leader or a leadership team?
No, no, and that's amazing. Now, there are many leadership coaches out there and consultants. There are many. But what makes me unique, and I think that's what you want to hear and your audience want to benefit from, it is clear to me that I have a unique perspective and I bring a different viewpoint to the table. And I go into each room knowing full well that I have value to bring. And I don't take it for granted that my upbringing, my background, and the many experiences I've had, and all the wonderful people I have met along the journey who have poured so much into me, and I hope I did into them likewise, that prepared me to bring a fresh perspective and a different viewpoint. And I think that's what is missing. You need somebody in the room that can make the light bulbs goes off to say, oh, I never thought of that. And I think that's what I bring, given my background. But I know as consultants and coaches, sometimes we can become so fixated in the solutions we have, and at times we ignore a very crucial step. And that crucial step is identifying the need of your clients, identify the need of the business and the person you want to help. And so I always make that the most important thing, to have that moment to sit down with you to understand what your challenges are, what are the goals and objectives you want to achieve, and then we work together collaboratively to bring about solutions for those challenges. Because I believe that most people, and I like to put it this way, there's a statement which I like to refer back to. It goes like they said that in life there are winners, there are losers, and there are people who don't know how yet to win. And I think the larger percentage of people are in that segment, or that grouping, whereby they just haven't put their finger on the pulse yet, and they just need somebody else to be able to interpret the frame that they are in. And I think that's what everybody should be, and that's the approach I take. So I really want to get in the room with the leaders who struggle with team disengagement issues, and now, given with the different clashes that is happening at this time, whether it be with technology, whether it be with the economic space, and of course globalism is a major one, because you can be in a company and you work with different people across different continents, in different countries, different cultures. All of that is very, very important. And I've had the opportunity to experience that firsthand in all the many roles I have served. And for somebody who have been so exposed, like myself and many others, we also bring that unique perspective and experience, that cultural awareness into the room, to ensure that you are looking at all the different angles to ensure that your business and whatever line of work you're in best serve your clients, best serve the market within which you operate. And I think even now more than ever, a lot of businesses, especially when it comes to governance level, these businesses want to best reflect the population that they do serve. And how are you going to serve that community well if you don't know what their needs are? You're not getting direct feedback from people who live amongst them and understand what drives them also.
Yeah, I love that. I want to kind of highlight two things. One for our audience, because I think it's easy for folks who are leaders to hear a consultant or a coach say, oh, this is who I serve, or this is how I serve people, and think of it like a sales pitch.
Yes.
But what I want you to hear, those of you out there listening, is that each coach or consultant who is around enough to be having a sustainable business has learned some really important things about how to help people. And when they tell you like who they can help and how, you actually have an opportunity to really gain some big important gold nuggets around how solutions come about by people who are testing how to solve business problems all the time. And one of the things I'm hearing you say is that context really matters, right? You're not just going to jump into a situation and assume that the solution that worked for the last person and their problem is going to work for this team and their problems. No, you're going to take the time to recognize the context of what's going on. And then, and you're going to also help bring additional context to the team in this cultural, we are in such a globalized world. Myself and my teeny bitty itty bitty company, I have two team members who are in Kenya, and one who's in the Middle East who works very part-time for me. So it's it's around us at every level. And I think the larger a business is, the more that is happening, the more cultures are involved. And I think you're right, representation matters, but also just anybody who has come from one culture and has experienced another culture that was quite different can develop that appreciation for how cultural differences can vary. They can be very similar or they can be very, very different. And once you start to learn that about one or two cultures, it's like a skill you pick up on noticing and being aware of which behaviors are cultural, and which are not. But so many are cultural. We don't realize that though till we've learned from another culture that what we thought was, just what everybody does is not at all what everybody does.
And I'm happy that you're living this firsthand, and you are a perfect example of what that is. And likewise, like I said, having three continents, I've been to many, many countries, and I've learned a lot. And I've also recognized that there are so much things that we also have in common, and in some instances, we have a lot more in common than you even think. And it is key because not having the right context, it means therefore you will fix things that is not broken, and it's just a silly thing to do. And I want to say we just need to listen more and find out what people's challenges are, and then we best position ourselves to find solutions for those problems. And of course, you can't do that without their permission. And how are you going to get their permission if you don't even take the time to understand them, to understand what it is that they're struggling with? You need to be able to show that. I think a key element that is missing is that relational and emotional development, which everyone requires now, even more so to succeed in this time.
Yeah, so true. I have a quick story that's come to mind about that, to bring this home for nonprofits, and the power of listening. I went to a cafe to work the other day, and a man who clearly was unhoused sat next to me, and I could tell that something was going on for him. And I have some familiarity with various things. And anyway, I took most of the day. I engaged with him as he wanted to, and brought in a friend who also engaged with him, and listened, and gained his trust enough and was able to help him a bit by the end of the day. But coming full circle, I have some former clients locally who are both in the mental health space. And this man had been unhoused. For 4 nights, and I learned that he had been released from the hospital and then unhoused for 4 nights. And by the end of the day, I had learned that he had been basically just dropped on the street. He'd insisted on leaving the hospital, who's schizophrenic. And I also learned of these two former clients, one whom I had worked with them on their communications and their website, and one whom I had not. And I don't work on websites anymore, but I was always very tuned into what it means to be the person on the outside looking for help. And all of a sudden I was very aware, because I knew that one of the one who I hadn't worked with on their communication, I knew from working with them inside that they were best suited to help this young man. But it was extremely hard for me to navigate, just to find the correct phone number and to get on the phone with the correct person. And so I uncovered, this very well-meaning, by many perspectives, successful nonprofit really failing to meet the needs of someone who's like their exact fit client, who really needed some help right away. And so I'll be having a little conversation with them to see what we can do to improve that. But it just goes to, you can do all this work to create all these services and programs, but if you don't really listen to your clients, if you can't put yourself in their shoes and then put your communication out there from their perspective, you've put this huge wall between you and the people you're trying to serve. And I think that's where when somebody coming in from the outside can really help you see that context, that, whoa, what you're putting out there is not from the perspective of your clients.
No, that was beautifully expressed, and I do hope that you're able to, support that individual in the best way you can to get him back on track to, become, out of that situation, because I know that can be a really, really challenging thing, and it can lead into a spiral towards
Yeah.
a very, very bad place. But you're so right, and it ties in perfectly to a next point, which is well known, which is people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And a part of caring is listening, because you will not really get to know what people are struggling with if you are not prepared to listen. And it takes practice, it takes discipline, because we are in a world where everybody want to, tune into their most favorite channel, which is what's in it for me. And oftentimes so much good fail to happen because we are blindsided and we don't really see immediate needs around us. And because for the work that I do, I'm always outcome focused, and I'm always about delivering good outcomes for people, having worked, in the nonprofit space in organizations that are member centric. So we operate for the best interests of the members, and we'll always serve their interests and ensure that they are looked after and they are treated fairly.
Yeah, I love that. Well, we are out of time. It's been such a fantastic conversation. So many gold nuggets, words of wisdom. You just dropped one, outcome focused. Everybody tune in there. Outcomes focused is so important. But we don't have time to dive deeper into outcomes at the moment. Tell us, Leroy, what is the best way for people who want to learn more about your work or work with you to follow or reach out to you?
Yes, I'm happy for anyone to connect with me at my name, Leroy Roberts, on LinkedIn. And it's much, much easier for you to connect with the other body of work in other places from that one channel.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Leroy. And thank you out there for listening to us and to your clients and to your team members, and for everything that you do to make our communities better. I have a small favor to ask of you. If you could share this podcast with somebody you know who would benefit from these conversations and tips and gold nuggets like we've had today, it would be helpful to us and to them and to you. Until next time, all the best.
You've been listening to Inspired Nonprofit Leadership. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode or the bonus episodes. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and review, and be sure to share with your friends and colleagues. Tune in every week for more useful insights and wisdom on nonprofit leadership. Thanks so much for all you do for the communities you serve. Until next time, all the best.